Hello, and welcome to the Employee Safety Podcast from Alert Media, where you'll hear advice from experienced safety leaders on how to protect your people and business. I'm Peter Steinfeld. It's April, which means Earth Day is right around the corner. This is a great opportunity to highlight an organization taking proactive steps to mobilize against climate risks. Mastercard is a global leader in these efforts. The company is committed to ensuring the safety of its people, facilities, and communities, in part by mitigating risks from extreme weather. That's where today's guest comes in. Montana Eck is Mastercard's Director of Physical Climate Risk and Resiliency. He leads the organization's efforts to assess and mitigate climate risks across Mastercard's global operations. With a PhD in geography and a background in climate research, Montana turns data into action to enhance physical resiliency, business continuity, and employee safety. Let's listen in. Hey, Montana, thanks for being here.
Thanks so much for having me.
So your title, Director of Physical Climate Risk and Resiliency, isn't one that we see at many companies. What exactly is your role, and why is it essential for a company like Mastercard?
To describe my role a little bit, I oversee our entire global real estate portfolio in terms of what does its climate risk look like today, tomorrow, and well out into the future. What exactly does that mean? When you're a company like Mastercard and we have global office locations, data centers, co-locations, hardware storage facilities, we really need to understand what's our risk to flooding, what's our risk to extreme weather, high winds, drought, etc. We have to really understand that today and out into the future. If we're going to continue to invest in a city or invest in a location, we want to make sure we feel good about the protections we have in place for that location. So a lot of my job is understanding the climate data, understanding the climate trends, and then talking to each one of our office and data center locations to say, what do you have in place already? When you have a portfolio of over 170 locations, you really need to understand what's in place today so I can really prioritize and put into motion what adaptation measures have the most impact today to where we're more resilient in the long term and into the future.
I imagine there's not a college degree specifically for something like this. So what led you to this field, and how did your background prepare you for the role?
I doubt that there's a specific PhD out there in terms of climate risk for a business, but really a lot of my background, I have a PhD in geography, which at a surface level, a lot of people might say, okay, geography, how's that fit into climate science? But really my degree is in physical geography, which is truly the understanding of climate science. So I have a master's and PhD in geography. I actually have a bachelor's degree in history, which I think is also really helpful to this, just trying to understand what's happened in the historic past, complementing that with the quantitative reasoning and the data we use for climate science to tell a story. That's really what a lot of my education and experience is storytelling.
I love how you said you try to educate people through storytelling. Did you come across that idea early on, or did you learn it the hard way that, oh, wow, there's probably a better way to do this?
It's interesting going through that academic background and then consulting. You ran into a lot of folks who may have been a little bit more skeptical about climate change or trying to understand, well, what's this really mean for me? A lot of times when you hear about climate change in the media or if you see it on TV, it's images of polar bears or it's images of sea level rise. That doesn't have a lot of meaning if your operations are in Nebraska or if you have operations in an area that's not impacted by these things you see on TV. And that's why I always go back to this idea of climate change is a global issue, but it's a backyard problem. And you've really got to tackle it and tell that story at a local level. There's a lot of different climate hazards out there, flooding, extreme precipitation, drought, high winds. If you're not able to connect how those things tie into broader picture things like utilities, what if my power goes out? What if my basement floods? What if I need to relocate my equipment? What's the impact to my employees as well? It's not just the built environment. You got to tell that complete story of my operations, my employees, and what that means to my consumer, as well as the people who utilize my services.
Well, what are some of the most significant climate risks facing businesses today, and how do they impact operations?
You know, a company like Mastercard, where we're very focused on our offices and data centers, we're very concerned about extreme precipitation and drought. These precipitation variabilities we're seeing in a given location. You have more intense drought. What implications does that have for a data center and your water usage? If you're having more extreme precipitation events, thinking about urban runoff and the flooding risk that that poses, not just to your building, but to the local roadways. What does that mean for your employees trying to get to work? What does that mean for your family and friends of your employees that live in these communities as well? Extreme heat's another one that really rises to the top. When you have more frequent days above 95 degrees, that puts a big burden on the energy grid. What implications does that have downstream? Sure, my building might be resilient to 95-degree days, 100-degree days, 105-degree days. But if the power grid is strained due to more extreme heat, what implications could that have for me if the power goes out? And not just for an hour, what if the power goes out for numerous days in a row due to extreme heat? So these are the sorts of things we're trying to think about as well. It's not just those direct impacts to the facility, it's those indirect and downstream impacts to utilities, impacts to our consumers, impacts to our supply chain. These are things we have to think about as well if we're really going to tell the story of a changing climate in a meaningful way and actually adapt and have real meaning on the ground.
So that's a lot of variables that you have to contend with. With that in mind, how does Mastercard assess climate risks across all your different locations, and what factors do you specifically consider?
It's something we've been developing over the last year and a half since I joined. So, what I really wanted to do from day one is get an understanding of what are the top climate hazards for my entire portfolio. So, we actually leverage a third party provider of high resolution climate data for each individual latitude and longitude of our offices, data centers, hardware storage facilities, etc. We have an idea of what's the climate risk look like for flooding today. How's that changing out to 2040? How's that changing out to 2100? So we look at that and try and get a good understanding of, are we at low risk today or is it increasing over time? Are we at high exposure today and it's decreasing over time? There's nuances to the climate data as well. For example, we still look at extreme cold, even though in a changing climate, we might expect that to be decreasing over time. Not going to go away, though. We still have to adapt and be prepared for extreme cold events in areas that are susceptible or prone to it as well. So for us, it's really trying to understand the physical climate data, but that's just one piece of the puzzle. But what about the sites themselves? What about our facility teams? What are they seeing on the ground? So for our program, what we really sought out to do was take a mixed methods approach, is kind of what I like to call it. The quantitative data from our third party provider, and then it's the qualitative data from the site itself. So we send out a survey, 200 plus questions. So, the facility teams might not like me at first when I send it out, but there's a lot of questions in there in terms of what are the experiences you've had in the last 10 years? Has your building flooded? Do you experience regular leaks at the windows? It might seem like these really minor inconveniences, but if you tell us about it, it's easier for me to adapt and say, hey, if those windows are leaking today and this building is exposed to extreme precipitation in the long term, maybe we should do something about the windows. Could be something as easy as changing sealants around the windows, or maybe it's a larger project we do later on down the road. We want to understand from the folks on the ground, what's your experience? What's your level of concern? What can we do as a company to better support you at that office or at that data center? Is there something we can do or trying to implement in terms of maybe it's improving the landscaping so water drains away from the building during heavy rainfall? There's simple things we can do and there's big things we can do. But really, for me, I'm not going to take any of those efforts without talking to my site teams first. They're the ones that are going to implement this, and they're the ones that have the relevant experience on the ground to actually see this out from initial problem to solution.
I like that bidirectional approach because you think about it, we all have our blind spots and things that we tolerate that we probably shouldn't. You might look at some data and say, wow, it could be 100 degrees for 60 days in a row. That's crazy. And then they say, well, that's just a regular day in Louisiana or in Houston.
Exactly.
It's totally fine.
Yeah.
And conversely, they may say, yeah, we've been dealing with this leak for the last 5 years. It's really not a big deal. We put a bucket over here. And you're like, that's crazy. Like, no,
Right.
stop doing that.
And those are the sorts of things too, where until our team came around, a lot of them might have just put that in and said, oh, I'm going to put this in as an incident, but I'm not going to worry about it because it happens all the time. No, we're really pushing them to say, if it's a minor inconvenience, tell us. We might not address it right away, but at least we have the data to back up our suggestions to do projects in the future. So whether it's a big problem or a small problem, we want the teams to know that they can report it to us so we can take actions to correct it. And to your point too, It is interesting doing these surveys and the one-on-one engagements with the sites because a lot of them say the same thing. I might go to a site like Dubai and say, man, extreme heat risk in Dubai, it looks like you guys face a number of days. And they'll just shrug their shoulders and say, that's fine. I'm actually more worried about heavy rainfall.
Yeah.
So those are the sorts of learnings that you get by talking to the site rather than just looking at the hard data itself.
So once you identify those big or small risks at a particular facility, what steps do you take to address them?
So that's kind of where we're going now. This last year was the first year we did a comprehensive climate risk assessment of our entire portfolio, whether you're a tech hub or whether you're a small office with 5 people in it. We did the climate risk assessment of the entire portfolio. So that included doing the climate data, that included doing the survey. Now we've collected all that information and we've been working through how to prioritize what projects would have the most impact on our people and on our built environment. So we're going through the process right now of implementing what we call the Climate Smart Resilience Checklist. It's a mouthful, but our project teams can go in there and reference and say, okay, Montana and the climate resilience team have identified this site as being high risk to drought. The site teams have said it's a problem. Could we do a rainwater collection system here? Could we have a backup water tank at this site? There's multiple options they can check through the checklist and say, what's most feasible for us at this site? And again, this goes back to us having that diverse portfolio. We have a lot of flexibility at our own sites. We can do any number of projects. At a lease site, it does depend on that relationship with the landlord. Is the landlord willing to work with us? Are they interested in doing some of these climate resilience efforts? More often than not, you just talk to the landlord and say, this is an opportunity to improve not only Mastercard's resilience, but also your resilience to a changing climate. This will make your building more secure for the future. People get bought into the idea that this is not a resilience effort for a short-term problem. It's a long-term problem that we're addressing. So we're kind of going through the motions of that right now of implementing that smart resilience checklist. There's a lot of fun little side projects we're doing right now too. There's a climate resilient landscaping project at our tech hub in O'Fallon, just outside St. Louis, where we're identifying tree species and plant species that are native to the region, but are resilient to drought, resilient to extreme heat, precipitation, flooding, etc. We want to plant trees and plants that will live 60 years, 90 years at the site, not have to be replacing them in 10, 15 years. So that's the sort of little initiatives we're doing on the side. I'm just really excited to see that we're getting to the place where we can start to implement some of these things in a meaningful way. And two, the employees are going to benefit from it as well. Anytime you do a project where the employees can go outside and say, oh, this tree was because of a sustainability and climate effort, that gets them more engaged in the process as well.
I can imagine the data-driven analytics really helps you get more support from the top down and more budget because it's very clear that this is going to have an impact and you've done the science and the study behind it.
Exactly. And I think that's really what helped out over this last year was it wasn't just me coming in and saying, here's what the climate data is saying. I'm able to come in and say, here's what the climate data is saying. Here's what the site teams are saying as well. You marry those two topics together, you get much more buy-in, as well as the fact that I'm engaging on the site level. The facility teams know my name. The facility teams know about the climate risk and resilience team. If they know of a project that could potentially benefit from climate resilience, they'll reach out and say, hey, I think there's an opportunity here. And it's just a natural progression of you go from a small one-person team at the start to now the entire organization and our entire facilities team are bought in and they know that there are opportunities here to improve our resilience across the board, both at a local and a global level.
So does your communication about this go beyond the facilities teams to like the broader employee population to make sure they're all engaged in the resilience efforts you're trying to promote?
Yeah, 100%. That's probably been the most exciting part of this last year for me is being able to engage with a variety of stakeholders, our environmental sustainability team, CFOs for the various different regions, talking to regional presidents as well, sharing this information out, or even externally outside of Mastercard. The topic of climate change, the topic of climate resilience can come up. And we know if we're investing in a region or if we're investing in a given location, we want that community. We want that city to also be investing in addressing climate resilience. Because again, a lot of the problems of climate risk or physical climate risk are downstream implications. I always bring up the utilities as the best example. I can make my building resilient. There's only so many generators I can put into a building, though. I have to rely on that utility and the local governments also taking climate risk and resilience seriously I'm really going to feel confident in my ability to withstand extreme events in the future in any given region.
Well, it seems like a lot of organizations out there struggle to make climate resilience a priority. And like you said before, it's a newer thing that people don't think about, even though, as you've also said, they've been dealing with forever.
Right.
So, how did you go about making this something that Mastercard prioritized, and what can people learn from that to make their own organizations try to prioritize it?
For me, it was really coming in with this idea of I don't want to just look at our most populated campuses. I came in and said, look, if we have people in that office, it's a priority location for me. So, one is getting a good understanding of what's my portfolio look like. We look at 7 different climate hazards here at Mastercard, but there's hundreds of hazards you could look at. It depends on your company. So before you try and deep dive into doing a climate risk assessment, get a good idea of what your portfolio looks like. Get a good idea of what hazards are most relevant to your organization as well. That was really key for us. Don't bite off more than you can chew. You can get lost in the weeds of climate data. So when I go and talk to stakeholders at the facility level, I'm not asking them irrelevant questions. I want them to feel like I've engaged and I'm asking them questions relevant for them. We got far more engagement, far more buy in, and there had to be less of that hand holding phase of here is what climate is, here is what a hazard is, here is what an adaptation measure is. A lot of this stuff happened instinctually. Now, at the same time, once you start to build out some of this, you got to do training. You got to engage. Yes, as we mentioned, extreme weather isn't new for anybody. Everybody checks their weather app. But the terms climate risk and resilience are new to folks. They may have heard through a grapevine, but what's that mean for MasterCard and how are we going to implement it? So we did a lot of engagements with our facility teams. We did engagements with our transaction management team for when they're looking for a new building or a new landlord. They know the right language. They know the right terms to ask to get some of this information from a potential landlord. I want the teams across the globe to know they can come to me and say, am I on the right path here? I think it took a lot of effort early on to kind of get some of these messages across. But like I said, you talk to one person, that starts a train. They start talking to other people at their location. Now, I'll say, we've made this an annual process. Everybody at the company knows that we're sending out this survey on an annual basis. We've implemented a plan for folks to know that they can report weather related incidents. We know that folks can come to us and say, hey, there was a heavy snowfall event. We're actually going to close the office today. Or, hey, there's a hurricane coming. We thought you should know we're going to close the office. So there's just more engagement, even broadly across the organization, that's naturally grown as I've conversed with more and more teams around the globe.
Well, before we sign off here, I'd love to hear about any progress that you've seen in climate resilience that makes you just optimistic about the future in this space. Is anything happening right now that excites you?
I think in general, the fact that my role exists at a company like MasterCard is really exciting. I think that it shows that there's a level of commitment from the corporate world that we're going to take climate change seriously. We are aware of the fact that the climate is changing. It's already changed. We are seeing more extreme weather events. At the same time, the fact that they're hiring folks like myself, there's other organizations that are hiring climate risk or climate resilience teams. We're putting our words into action. We're not just saying we're going to adapt. We're putting projects into place. We're talking to sites about things. And I think just in general, like I mentioned, folks talk about weather. I think that that conversation is just changing from weather to climate. And it's getting folks talking on the ground about, that rain event. I've never seen it rain that hard before. I wonder, is something changing? Getting that conversation happening at a local level, that's what inspires change. And it's just exciting that we're seeing it at a global company like MasterCard. I'm able to have these conversations with my real estate team. I'm also able to have these conversations with folks in Bogota. I'm able to have these conversations with folks in Pune, India, Sydney, Australia, Purchase, New York, London, England. I'm talking to people all around the world, and they're all telling me the same thing. I'm excited we're looking at this. Tell me what I can do to help. So the fact that we're having these conversations, that's what has me more optimistic than anything.
That's great. And it's good for human safety, but also for company productivity.
100%.
Well, Montana, you are a articulate and passionate spokesperson for this topic. So thank you for being on the show. I appreciate it.
Oh, yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks so much for having me.
To learn more about Montana and his work with MasterCard, click on the links in the episode description. You can also watch the video highlights on Alert Media's YouTube page. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review the show wherever you get your podcasts. Stay safe out there.
Thank you for listening to the Employee Safety Podcast from Alert Media, the industry's most intuitive emergency communication and threat intelligence solution. To learn more about how to protect your people and business during critical events, visit alertmedia.com. Until next time.